Minnow, God bless you. Harry, Johnny, Nina, Danny, God bless you guys. Hello. Hey, Vic. Paul, Bono, Lingo, God bless you guys. Give it a few minutes, guys. Hi, Big L. God bless you, Perry. Gonna give it a few minutes so we can get everybody in here. Hi, Whitey White. God bless you. Good to see you. Steve Brooklyn. God bless you. Gypsy Girl. Whopper. God bless you. Baby Frank. George Trenton. God bless you guys. Guys, just gonna give it a couple minutes. Am I very low? Can you guys hear me any better now? Guys, give me a thumbs up if you could hear me good. Hi, Sam. Okay, good. I'm just going to give it a few minutes, guys. 2-3 minutes. And then we'll begin with the program. Talk just a little bit about last week, how we finish up there. And then we'll go into the new part. God bless you, Pastor George. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Love you too, George. God bless you. Give it another minute till 5 minutes after 11. Then we'll start to talk a little bit about what's going on with the show tonight. Hi, Quake. I like this little wave. You could wave to everybody. Hello. Okay, guys, let me tell you what's going on a little bit. We were supposed to, I talked to Pastor Doobie a couple, 2-3 days ago, a day or two after the surgery, and God bless Jesse. And what happened is he was going to come on to the show tonight because we was going to talk about the church. Hi, Eddie. And what happened is, hi, Pastor Uncle Nicky. God bless you. Good to see you in the room. What happened is Pastor Doobie is still, I believe, in Philadelphia or Delaware, where his grandson Nicky, who had the back surgery, they're still there, and he's still there in Philadelphia, him and Sally. So obviously we couldn't have him on. But that's okay. Thank God for the miracle that the Lord done over there with the baby. Thank God for what he's doing there. And, you know, we're going to go on with the show. I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit. Just a little bit, touch base where we left off last week. And then we're going to go into the Chicago Christian Center and talk about that. We're going to have our guest, Steve Strego, is going to come up. I'm not going to say about right now, the secret guest texted me that he's not able to come on right now. So it's going to be last minute if he could make it. If not, then I'll tell you guys who it was going to be. So I want to give a shout out. Last week when I mentioned and I read the list of the pastors that came from Rest for the Weary Ministries, I forgot to mention a pastor, and it's funny that I forgot to mention him because he was really one of my closest friends, Pastor Blazo in the Bay Area. I forgot to mention him last week. Me and him served in John John's church together. We literally did the My Faith course, me and Pastor Blazo with Uncle Nicky. Me and him used to study all the time at my house, so I forgot to mention Pastor Blazo. Pastor Blazo, if you see this or hear about it, God bless you. Sorry we didn't mention you last week. So last week we talked about Pastor Pat McLean in the late 70s, early 80s. Then we went on to Pastor John Rest for the Weary Ministries. And we left it just before the concert started. Just before we went to the concert, that's where I left it off. And I had something set up for the concert tonight, but it didn't work out that way, guys. So we was going to talk a little bit about the concert, but unfortunately didn't turn out that way. So we're just going to move on. What happened is that, well, I'm going to bring up our guest in a second if he's in here. Steve Strego, are you here? Give me a wave so I can make sure you're here. I'm going to bring up Steve Strego, and Steve Strego is going to tell us a story about him, about when he came to church, and how come he came here to Chicago. Give me a second, Steve, so I could find you. Actually, Steve Strego was there before. He was at the theater with us, and then the Doobie. So give me a second. I can't seem to find Steve Strego. Sorry, guys. Give me a minute. Okay, I don't think Steve's in the room because I can't seem to find him. All right, there he is. Thank you, Eddie. I'll call you up later. Mr. Strego.
Ronnie.
How are you?
Ron?
Can you hear me?
No, man, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you good. How about now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Steve?
Ronnie?
How about now?
Very little bit. Want me to go out and come back in?
Yeah, do that. Request me as soon as you get out when you come back in.
Hold on. I think my Josh could fix it. Hold on.
Just hit the home button.
Hello?
How about, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Guys, can you guys all hear Steve Strego and me? Give us some thumbs up. I don't think if they can hear us. Guys, can you hear us?
Hey, guys, can you hear us?
Okay, good. Okay.
Boys, bring me the guitar. I think Ronnie wants me to sing.
Yeah. Out of all the guys, I want you to sing. God bless you, Steve. How are you?
Good, Ronnie. God bless you.
You seen the show last week. We finished up. Well, we didn't completely finish, but we went on talking the story about Pat McLean when the church started in 78.
Right.
And then we went on to Rest for the Weary with Pastor Johnny. And then we was going to continue tonight with Pastor Doobie and Chicago Christian Center. But unfortunately, Pastor Doobie was in a situation there where the baby was sick, so he couldn't come on tonight.
Yeah, his
But I talked to you before about this, something you shared with me, the story about how you came here to Chicago. And, you know, if anybody that don't know, Steve Strego serves on the Congregation. He's a deacon. He fills in for Pastor Doobie. When Pastor Doobie's not here, he preaches. He runs a meeting for the couple. So Steve's a servant at the Congregation. And Steve, God bless you for coming in the room. You came, I think it was 90 or 91, to the theater with your family. That was before you was married, right?
Yeah, I was.
Tell us what happened.
Single. Okay, well, I actually came because John was a personal friend of my father's.
Right.
But John would come to us after church, right? Mm-hmm. But my father wasn't a Christian, you know, but my dad loved him because he came over to Pichol to have a normal conversation, my father would say. And so we knew John. Matter of fact, John used to call us and tell us, hey, come to church so we go eat. But I knew he was getting us in church.
Right.
You know? And the building I seen, or the church I walked into, was the one that the one you bought on Western and Devon.
The theater.
The theater. And my cousin Harry Strego was the sound guy.
Yeah, he was a worker in the church.
Yeah, he was a worker in the church. But this is when, and just for people to know, back in 1987, 88, I think it was 88, I was the only one who opened my heart in my family to Christ. And I used to have to hide John's the tapes in the back of my seat of my truck so my father wouldn't find them.
Wouldn't find them.
Yeah, 100%. So I always had a special place in my heart for the Chicago choir. And but you know, it was about the music then. And so then in 90 we came to Chicago. Now my family was from Chicago, but we moved back to Chicago. And I came to church, but I was still, I was a young single guy, and I would just go to the church, and with Harry, and my brother Kelly would come with us.
Yeah.
And what happened was, Ronnie, it was not my time. It was not my time. I don't know why that my heart was always pulling to Chicago.
Right.
But that was not my time, Janice. That's not the time that God aligned for me to actually serve a Nikangari. And then what happened was me and Sam Archies and Kelly went to have pizza on Clark Street, about a block away from Wrigley Field. And we got out of the restaurant, and a minivan pulls right in front of us, and guys jump out of the car. You would have thought it was a hit. And it's Pastor Doobie. I think Sam will remember it. Pastor Doobie, Jimmy White, Nikki Palms, and I think there was a third one. There was another one. You might have been there too, Ronnie.
No,
and
I don't remember.
They gave us a piece of paper because Pastor John was going to do a service about Halloween.
Okay.
I'm not joking with you. I talked to Doobie at that time for maybe 2 minutes, okay? Because they had to hurry up and go to other places. We ended up going back to Seattle. I moved back to Seattle. And then in 2003, Meaki Lisa, we prayed and that we were going to come to Chicago, step of faith, no dabarimos, and just trust in God and roofing, and come to Chicago. And the smart man that I am, I came to Chicago to do roofing in October.
Good time, yeah.
Right?
Good time.
Who does
when the
that?
cold starts.
But at that time, we prayed about it, and pinned down, but we want to do 6 months of no dabarimos, and just roofing. I had no idea that I would ever serve in Pastor Doobie's church. There was always a reason. There was always something that led me to. I'm not on the choir, but my heart always, and still does, it really leans toward the choir, because I remember those days when we used to hide tapes in the back of the truck. And so here's what got me interested in the church. We had made a step of faith in 2003. There was a huge movement going on in Pastor Doobie's church.
Yes, I remember very well.
Strong. And I walked in, and Pastor Doobie comes up, and he goes, "Steve Strego, how are you?" And it caught me by surprise, Ronnie. How's this guy know my name?
Right,
Because
I would remember you.
And I'll tell you that when, for some reason, the fact that the man remembered me, I don't know why, it did something to me. It just made me pay attention, okay?
Right.
At the time I walked into church, I had to call myself a Baptist because my cousins are Baptist ministers. I just came to listen to music. You understand? Right. And there was a big, at that time, it was Foster Avenue, Foster and Elston. Pastor Doobie had been a minister for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of men of God came from that.
Yeah.
That movement.
Share a list of that from that time.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys, a lot of my personal friends just came out of that movement. And what I did was I wouldn't say yes to reading a psalm for like 6 months. I was attending the church, but I wouldn't do it until I talked to Doobie. I had questions, okay, and I wrote them down. And by the time me and Pastor Doobie had time to actually meet and talk about my questions, we met for lunch. The Lord had already revealed the answers in the Word, okay? And do you want me to tell you what the one thing that moved me to start doing?
Go ahead.
Okay. So Pastor Doobie, now if anybody knows me, knows that I'm more of I don't do anything just in dino. I don't want to make a mistake. You understand? I'll study 10 times. It's just got to be right. But I was not in the Word. Okay. And we were at a hall, and Pastor Doobie, a birthday party, and he said, Steve, I was praying, and the Lord spoke to me and said that we're doing a men's retreat, and that you have to put both days together for us, both 2-day teachings. So I said, okay, no problem. Just tell me what you want me to put in the computer, and I'll do it. And what happened is Pastor said, no, that's not what the Lord told me. You actually have to put the whole teachings together, 2 days. And for 30 days, I drove the man crazy. Please, Pastor.
Not me.
Come to the house. Read this. Just matter of fact, Ronnie, I was so worried about it that I did not get a room with the boys that night. In case it was a mistake, I'm out.
I'm going home.
Janice. And there's a true story. And so for Pastor Doobie he would not, he wouldn't listen to me. May please tell me what to write. I don't know what I'm doing. Steve, it's not that I trust you. I trust in the Lord. And what happened was the day before the teaching, right before we're supposed to go, he said, meet me at Kinko's so we can print these out. And so I met him at Kinko's. My pastor, please read this. Janice, nope. And he had the guys, you print them. And we had 100 of them, books made. He wouldn't read it. And he turned two over, and he signed it. He goes, you sign it here and put the date. Right? I'll keep one and you keep one. And we kept them. I still have mine downstairs. Yeah. So we get to the meeting, and we get to the meeting. I stay by the door. I swear to you, I stood by the door in case or when the flop happens, I'm out the door, right? I'm nervous. And Pastor Doobie gets behind the pulpit, and he starts reading as the boys are worshiping. And he said, and I could see that the man's getting a little emotional. So he stops the teaching, or he stops the worship, because I got to tell you guys something. He said, a month ago, the Lord told me to get Steve Strego to put the 2-day teaching and the whole study, do it for 2 days. Remember, I wasn't in the Word. Right. And, but that made me jump in the Word, and it made me triple check everything I did, because,
right. You wanted to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
Not to make a mistake.
And then Pastor said, just in case, I wrote something too for 2 days. And he held them both up. And the man started to cry. And he said, they're exactly word for word the same thing. Wow. Both days are identical. Even the closing statements and scriptures are identical about discipleship. And that caught me off guard. Right. And
they're life-changing.
And then the work of the Holy Spirit was so strong then. And then Pastor Doobie, I was part of the church. I was involved, but I was Billy White was praying over me, and it says in the prayer, he says that the Lord called me to his word. And I'm like, what's going on here? Right? Lisa's giving me a hard time. Dino, can't we just sit down in the pews? Right?
Right.
Pastor Nick Martin, he came to church. I'm kind of on tilt because there's a lot going on. People's, prophesizing over me that I'm called to the word. And Pastor Nick Martin comes to preach. I sit by myself. I walk in late, and the man preaches. And you know what you do after a church?
You go talk to the pastor.
Yeah. And so, you go to the pastor, and I go, hey, Pastor, God bless you, good word. And he just won't listen. He goes, the Lord was speaking to me while I was doing my sermon. I almost stopped. Now, before I left the car, before I got out of the car inside, I said, Lord, I need to know that it's you who's calling me to serve in this church, and you're calling me to the word, or is it just me?
Right.
Okay.
Emotional. Personal.
Right. And Pastor Nick Martin said, are you asking God if it's him who called you or you? the Lord wanted me to tell you that he's called you to his word. And I was just, and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
And in that time, Ronnie, there was a lot going on. This is also when Joey White, his daughter, got meningitis, Cindy.
Right.
And she was 12 years old at the time. And she was posted-out. We were all there praying for her every night. At the same time, Nepata was doing a hip surgery on the other side of town. And I remember going to Joey White to the hospital. And by this time, Cindy was okay. But she couldn't talk because the tube was in her mouth for so long.
Right.
The breathing tube, her vocal cords were messed up and she couldn't talk. And Joey, you go into the room and you could just feel the presence of the Lord. I mean, the peace and the joy, it was like a stillness of joy. I mean, everybody was just in the joy of the Lord. And I'm sitting with Joey and he says, this man, I think he was from Mexico or something like that. He said, this man sent me this CD that God told him the song. And he played it for me. And what song was it? Talita Kumi. And it was only maybe a couple months later that we went into the studio. And that's where we got There's No God Like Jehovah, Talita Kumi. Previous to that was Le Plainga.
Right.
And that was all that movement. It was all that was happening. I watched Cindy go into the studio and sing her part, and we're in tears.
Right, because you see what she was going through.
We remembered when she was supposed to die, and all along God knew that she was going to give him glory in the studio just a couple months later.
Right.
Okay.
Amen. Thank you, Jesus.
And in that movement, the first 4 years, well, I'll tell you what made me start in church. There was a little issue in church, and there was a fight in church, in the Chicago church of all things.
Oh, that don't happen there too much.
Right. And what happened is Pastor Doobie was outside, and I didn't have his personal cell number, Janice. And there was a fight, and I seen Pastor Doobie, and he went to tell the people stop. But he just went like this. He said, please stop. But he said it real weak, and just like, he was so embarrassed.
Right.
And a lot of people would say that God told me, and they use that word too freely.
Right.
Okay? I believe a lot of times the Holy Spirit might definitely reveals us something in his word, but maybe God has spoken to me maybe 5 times in my life. You understand? Yeah. And I heard a voice, and it said that I'm in town to help him. And that's been,
God brought you here for a purpose.
And that's 15 years. And in the word,
Right.
And it's been 15 years. Now, do you want me to talk about the ministers and how that movement happened?
Well, the reason I asked you to come up, like I said, the program is this is the 4th week, and I'm still trying different things and stuff. But what I wanted to do is with everyone, every church is bring somebody up that something happened to them in that church. Something that changed somebody's life, somebody that went through something and their life changed through that ministry. And you was talking about the 2003 time when the Amelou Wadiz, because I have to say Chicago has always been a choir city, Congaranza.
Yeah.
In the early parts of the church, there was Jimmy White and Wally White and Steve White and Brewster. Then Fat Tommy and his brother Louie. Then there was Steve Johnson, Archie Miguel, Betty, Cola from Franzuzo, Woso from Mexico.
Right.
Then Patty, Jimmy Lovati, the choir members that went through this church were amazing. And then in 2003, that area, they started with Plainga, and then Amelou Wadiz, then the Plainga. I came to the church. Well, I'm going to tell, after I'm done with this, I want to tell everybody when the church started and everything. I was there from day one when the church started, but I was out for a good while, and I was up and down in Texas. And in 2003, I came to church. It was actually when I was going through my born-again experience when I came to church there. That's Father's Day. And it was amazing what was going on in the corner with those guys, And I wanted to read this list. This is what came from that ministry. Pastor Josh White in Tampa, Pastor Nikki Buck, San Francisco, Pastor Leo in Chicago, Pastor George Tan, Milwaukee, Pastor Anthony Shades, Orlando, Pastor Leo, Las Vegas, Pastor Tommy Cooper in Toronto. And I'm sure there's maybe a couple of guys we might be missing. But the Lord's been working with this church since it opened in 1999. And I thank God that there's always somebody to come up and share. You know, that's the point about this room and this program, is to talk about how the churches started and what happened in those churches. They can.
Right.
And these are all blessed men of God. They're preaching the word of God. They're teaching the word of God. Their
Amen.
churches are growing as they go. You can. It's a big blessing to go through something like that. Ken, it's so nice when you could be a part of when people talk about something spectacular or miraculous and you've seen it with your own eyes. It's amazing.
Ronnie, that time when it was going on, I tell you what, Josh White, Brewster was the choir director.
Yeah.
Josh White was, he would play guitar and he would play bass, and he hated playing bass. And the music, Josh White wrote 90% of all the famous music that we hear.
Yeah.
And I watched that. Michael Miller, we went to the studio to sing the song, whichever CD it was, with Dalita Kumi, There's No God Like Jehovah.
I think that was Lanzorat, Padre Lanzorat.
And what happened was, you know, when you go to a studio and you've got a glass, and then like the people behind the mixing board, and then there's a glass, and then the person sings on the other side.
Right.
So we get there, and there's paper napkins all over the window, taped, and we can't see on the other side. And I'm like, what's going on here? And they go, Michael Miller's singing. I go, yeah. Lajal, for anybody that's seen him sing. And he put napkins, so we couldn't see him. And then I mean, that was amazing too. I love that. I still love that. When we were in studio, I pray for the next CD. You understand? Right. And matter of fact, we're going to the studio now. But what happened in that movement was there was this thing, and it was, I tell you what was the epitome of all that is Jerusalem. We were going to do a 2-day event. Okay. And it was in Rosemont at the Stevenson Convention Center. And we went there, Jerusalem. The Lord gave Pastor Doobie a word. Okay. And for the city. And we called it Jerusalem. And so we got this big, huge, beautiful hall. And that was the peak of that movement. Okay. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was a revival. Now, we didn't know. Now, see, this is what it also supports it. Pastor Leo will remember this. We never said revival. You see, when you call out revival, that's not really the way in history revivals happen. Right. It's coming in agreement, and revival ends up happening. Right. For me to just start like now and say, hey, there's going to be a revival, it's not, yeah. Right? God doesn't work like that, you know. And so what happened is we all met, and I would think everybody will agree the first day was we had David Dolly's, great man of God, was there. We had Perry Wanko was there. His brother Alan was on the choir. We had Tommy, Johnny Miller, Josh, Brewster. We had all the Bucks. Now, you can't just say Nicky Buck, man of God, because his two brothers could be ministers if they wanted. Really? And they were all part of that. Sonny Buck, DJ Buck, okay? Okay. And then you had Pastor Leo here, and Pastor Leo, Tommy's in Vegas now. And we had, who else? We had a lot of people. We had Mikey Stevens, he was a big part of the church then. Yeah. And we had Paul Johns was part of the church at that time. let's see who else. There were a lot of guys who were men of God, and what I did was, Ronnie, 7 pastors, right? And I mean, even though I'm not a pastor, I was called to the word.
Amen.
You know, but mine was called to stay. Some people are called to go,
right?
Like Zacchaeus, he wanted to go with Jesus, but his calling was to stay,
right?
And so, but what happened? Jerusalem was the epitome of that. Okay, right. And as a matter of fact, there was the Jerusalem thing was amazing, and I went back. I used to keep down. I used to write down Pastor Doobie's messages, okay, for the first 4 years, okay, and I went back a couple of years ago and read those teachings, and you can really see how men of God came out from there, because the Lord was giving teachings about trusting in the Word of God. Do you know God's voice? Do you pray with your wife? 1 Timothy, the requirements, count the cost. Okay, all these teachings were building blocks.
Right.
It was building homes. Okay, and that's where, and then ministers came out of it. Okay,
right.
Pastor Anthony Shades used to do
Sunday school for the
kids. He did Sunday school. We were making this movie, but he lost the tapes. Pastor George from Milwaukee. I mean, he was right there. I mean, there were so many of us guys, right. And I got to tell you, we're all still personal friends.
Yes,
you know. And we went last year. I won't take it too long. Last year there was a teaching, a Holy Spirit conference. I was invited to do a teaching, and Josh was there, Michael was there, the Bucks were there, and I remember the last day at Pastor Nikki in San Francisco, and everybody just kind of got their spot. Josh grabbed the guitar, Michael went up to sing, we came up to pray, and it wasn't planned. And I'm telling you, man, it was back in 2003.
Yeah.
You know.
And praise the Lord.
Yeah. And somebody told me something that really stuck, and all glory goes to God. They said, Steve, forget the amount of people, ministers who came out of that movement. But that's what they said. They said, every minister stuck. You understand?
Yeah.
They didn't bail.
Right.
You understand?
God bless
and I never really thought of it that way.
True servants.
Yeah. And so, and that's where this movement came. And then the boys grew in their ministry, and the Lord called them to different ministries, you know. And
it's safe to say Chicago Christian Center bared some fruit.
Yeah, 100%. And all glory goes to God, because we really didn't know.
Right. Amen.
You know, we were just being faithful to God, you know. And really, I can say this. Pastor Samuel, who took over for Pastor Anthony Shades in town, him and Frank, his father Frank, was a big part. He was a communion server with us.
Frank was there with us right from the start.
And Samuel, as a kid, used to come to the church. You understand? So there was a lot of, and all glory goes to God. Now we look back on it. And for some reason, I just think Chicago, a lot of ministers came out of Chicago in general. Yeah. You know, in John's ministry.
Yeah, with the ministry, over 20, 25 guys.
Sure. Yep. And so I'm here serving with Pastor Doobie. I thank God for 15
God bless
years.
you and your family. You're doing a great job, Steve.
All glory goes to God. This is our calling. And I'm proud of every one of my friends. Sure. Every one of my friends. I pray for them all the time. And all the ministers who came out of this ministry. And the thing is this, God is still working in the church. You know, God hasn't stopped.
Amen.
You know, God is still working.
Yes.
So,
Steve Strego, my good friend, thank you so much for coming up and sharing that with us. I really appreciate it.
God bless you.
God bless you and your family. Great story. I'm going to go on to tell the story of how this started. So God bless you.
All right, brother. God bless you, man.
God bless you, Steve.
Bye.
God bless you guys. God bless Steve Strego. Great story. Like I said, that's what I want to do. I want, you know, this isn't just for our fun so we can hear an old story. It's It's about sharing socorro lodel and the kakakangara. So I'm going to tell you guys a little story. And for a lot of you guys that were there last week, you're going to think it's a repeat, which is funny. I'll say it again. You guys think it's a repeat of last week's story. And I'll tell you guys what happened. It was February 28th, 1999. 11 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from Pastor Doobie. Do me a favor. Well, come pick me up. We got to go to the Holiday Inn in Evanston. So we're opening up a church today. You want to come and help? So I said, yeah. So me and my son, Michael, went and picked up Pastor Doobie. I believe his three boys came, Sammy, Nikki, and Albert. We went over there to the hall about 12 o'clock. We met Steve White, Dalierto Bobo White, Joey, Brewster, Johnny Miller, Scooter Miller, one or two other guys. I told them with Josiah, and we prayed, and we put ourselves, and we set up the room for church. And if I'm not mistaken, it was about roughly 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, we had service, and we started church. And we did service there 2 weeks in a row. We had church. Must have been 60 or 70 people that first Sunday. By the fourth or fifth Sunday, but we went and rented one of the beautifulest churches that I've ever seen. In all my years going to churches, we had a church in Evanston, and it was one of the beautifulest churches that I've ever seen in my life. I started Sunday services, and let me tell you guys something. Those were some of the most beautiful times in my life on the Kangari. The ministry, the way it started, the people that were involved, very dedicated. And then, like I said, Steve, I fell out for a time, and but the church kept growing, got bigger. Within weeks, there was 200 people, 300 people coming in church. We had I believe it was a Palm Sunday, and we had to go to a different church in Evanston. Yeah, the red one, Sammy, with the white. It was one of the beautifulest churches. We had to go and get a different church in Evanston because we couldn't get the big church. And the church was packed. I think there was like 300 people. And like I shared, the ministers came out of this church. We just read 7 of them, and I'm sure there was a couple more that we might have missed. But I say this, Chicago Christian Services, Chicago Christian Center has been a very big part of Chicago since 1999. The Lord has been working in this church. Many ministers came out of this church. Around the world, a lot of people from this church went to spread the word, to spread the gospel. I thank the Lord for Pastor Doobie, the servants, and I'm proud to say that I was a part of it from the start. And I thank God for you guys, all of you guys that are a part of that church. So, guys, like I said, Pastor Doobie was supposed to be our main speaker tonight, but like I said, he's still in the East Coast, kind of his grandson. The secret guest was supposed to be Pastor Josh White. I spoke to Pastor Josh White. He was supposed to be in the room tonight. He was going to tell us a couple of stories about the more popular songs. But Pastor Josh texted me at the last moment. He was in a meeting with Leron. They had some church business and he couldn't get away. So thank God anyway, the effort was there. So here's what's going on with this. And I hope that it continues. I hope you guys like the show. I hope you guys want to continue with it. This is my plan for the next week or so. Next week, Lord willing again, Oshawoda did the surgery, or Nikki, you got to understand, the Philadelphia church is where this boy is from. Pastor Matthew is his father in the Philadelphia. Anthony Martin is his grandfather. And those are the 2 guys I was planning to have on for Philadelphia. God bless you, Nick. How are you? So I was planning to have Anthony and Pastor Matthew. I spoke to them about 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to speak to the boys this week, and hopefully, if they're not ready, then we're going to talk about Brooklyn with Pastor Tony. Pastor Tony, Brooklyn, and Philadelphia opened up literally a couple of months apart of each other. I think it was 83, 84. So we're going to be talking to those churches hopefully next week. Then after that, like I said from the start, if you guys remember, I mentioned Pastor Safka, Pastor Milano, Pastor John. Well, let me go this way. Pastor Safka, Los Angeles, Pastor Milano in Houston, Pastor John Chicago, Pastor Nikki in Philadelphia, and Pastor Tony in Brooklyn. Those were the 5 pastors that I was going to talk about. And then after that, however the Lord leads, you know, I'm not going to go by a timeline because so many churches came after that. Then we're just going to start to invite and talk to pastors. Hopefully I get a chance to talk to Pastor Blasio, Pastor Rooney in Miami, Pastor Blasio in the Bay Area. And just, you know, Pastor Franca told me, Pastor Frankie, Power Ministry, said that he'll come on with me. So our plan next week is for Philadelphia, hoping everything goes well with the baby over there, the healing, the process that's going on now, and that the Philadelphia guys will have the time for us next Saturday night. So again, guys, I'm not going to keep the room open just to keep it open. I thank everybody for coming in tonight. God bless you and your families. Next week, our plan is to talk about Philadelphia and Brooklyn Church, maybe together. So God bless you guys. Good night. I will see you guys next Saturday night at 11 o'clock. God bless.